or afternoon, depending on your time zones, or night. But we're looking at a market that was ready to fall apart. And that kind of appearance has persisted throughout the last few years, when the markets look like they're ready to blow apart, followed by poor action on behalf of leading stocks. They, lo and behold, find a shallow floor and move higher on both the parts of the major indices and leading stocks. Case in point, the FANG stocks.
Hey, Dr. K, can you hang on 1 second here? I'm trying to, it's telling me I need to clear off some disk space to record the webinar here.
Okay,
So I'm
sure.
trying to figure this out. So let me see what... Just give me a second here. So everybody just hang on. I'm going to try and get this taken care of.
Sure.
Let's see.
I mean, I don't know. This is the strangest moment. If it finishes off at one point, then you can just start the recording from there.
Yeah. So
just do that, and we don't have to keep people waiting.
all right. Well, let's. I mean, we've already basically discussed where things are at in terms of where the market's at. So one of the things that I do. Let's see. What's this thing telling me? In this market, because if you remember last Tuesday or this past Tuesday, you had a break in the market, and you know, that's like what I like to say, when the market wants to play rough. And what happens is suddenly the market just sells off. There was the news of Donald Trump's son having an email exchange with a Russian attorney, which is really nothing, but it caused the market to sell off hard on Tuesday. So one of the things that I'll do every day is I'll actually use a small hedge in the UVXY. So what I look for is a MACD stretch and cross. So we get one down here, and it's around 864, I think it was. So I'm actually long a little bit of this, and I use it as a hedge. And this came in very handy on Tuesday. And because you had this thing jack like 10-15% and nothing flat, and it actually helps you keep your head when the market suddenly comes under pressure. And I think it's a helpful tool. So if you know how to use a 620 chart, it's basically looking for the MACD stretch and cross, and then taking a small position, and then just seeing how it handles itself from there. Now, I notice it's crossing below a little bit, but it's not really below my entry, so I'll kind of hang out and see what happens. The Dow is up 10, and you're in an extended position up here with the indexes. So, you know, I think that can be a problem. So, let me say, I'm dialed into phone line, not computer audio. Sound back. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, Judd, but we use the, I would suggest using online audio rather than dialing in, but whatever, if it works for you. Anyways, so let's go through the focus list. Anything catch your eye on there besides the AAOI, Dr. K?
Yeah, well, I mean, there were some names we'd had on the list. I mentioned CC earlier.
Here's ANET. ANET is, well, that does, yeah, but those are off now, right? So,
yeah, but there was a couple mentions on stocks that people should keep on their watch list. They're not on the focus list, like Wix and Shop. They're cousins. They allow people to set up businesses on the web, and they had been doing well, but you know, they're going through a basing period, and it's worth, you know, just keep an eye on these guys, because you know, at some point their fundamentals are strong. So should the market continue its way higher, as it has for much of this year, these stocks will probably mend, and then have, you know, look for voodoo setups, look for undercut and rallies if that, you know, if the market were to correct and take these stocks back down. But in the meantime, you know, I think the best kind of formation for these types of names that are sitting up there are voodoo type, you know, where the volume gets very quiet over a period of at least a few days, and that allows for a low risk entry point.
I don't know if I like this one. It's kind of choppy, and it's trying to hold the 50-day, I guess, but I don't know. It looks, it's had a big run already, so I don't know. I'm a little skeptical of this one. What's the other one you like?
Well, it's just for the watch list, basically. That's all it is. But
Yeah,
Shop is the
this
other
one's
one.
hanging in there okay, so it doesn't look too bad. So
That one looks better because it's not as erratic. And Shop has also been more of the leading price leader between the two names. And then there was also just, oh yeah, there was Yandex, YNDX. I mentioned that a couple days ago, but
that's still actionable. That's a viable gap up, and it's still
I'm going to put out a report. I'm going to put a report on it because it was okay yesterday, and today it's giving a lower risk entry point.
Yeah, I think they got a big pop because Uber announced that they're going to merge their business in Russia with Yandex dot whatever it's called dot ride or whatever, I forget. But in any case,
that's a legitimate. In other words, it's a great reason for the stock to be gapping higher.
right.
And then before that, you know, when I mentioned it, it was only kind of a mid-bar close. It wasn't looking all that strong, and it didn't qualify as a viable gap up either because the volume just, you know, was only like 34% above average. But it's actionable now at any rate, and I think that's a great addition to their platform. You know, obviously Uber that covers Russia and all those neighboring countries.
Ericsson Networks is still on the list, and of course this is another one. It was starting to look like garbage in here, and it is actually able to regain the 50-day moving average here, and I think we wrote in the notes that could put it in play as a moving average undercut and rally. It undercuts. It actually violates the moving average here. You can see that right here, and it just turns around and goes back up. Now it's holding tight and hanging in there. I think earnings come out at the beginning of August, like the first couple 3 days of August. So there it is again. But you know, these things, they break and then they just go back to new highs. They break, they go back to new highs. Coherent is doing that. And it's, you know, you can get frustrated by it, but again, I think that the main takeaway that you all should note here is that you can use the moving average undercut and rally setup to go back along some of these stocks, especially if they look like they're busting support or violating their 50-day moving average and they're looking ugly. You know, you can come back after them, because then what happens is the 50-day line, maybe give another 1 or 2% max, the 50-day line becomes your selling guide. And look at, for example, Facebook did that last Friday, got above the 50-day line, so that becomes viable there. You could use the 50-day line as your stop, or, you know, add another % or two, and you would be in it and it's going higher. But that sort of setup works a lot in this market. So while the market seems confusing, the reality is the setups that we've seen and that we've already cataloged for this market, like a moving average undercut and rally, like an undercut and rally move, where the difference there is that instead of undercutting a moving average, you're undercutting a prior low, like was the case with Netflix last week. Okay, that's an undercut and rally coming up to this 147.30 low, and now you're back up here. So I think the 50-day line, you get a pocket pivot here, and the pullback to the 50 line gives you a low risk entry point there. So it's a crazy market, but there are ways to deal with it, but I think it helps to be somewhat nimble as a trader rather than trying to buy stuff. Like, I'll give you an example. Here's Nutanix. We've talked about this one many times. This is like a viable gap up this morning, and Goldman put it on their conviction list, so that looks pretty good. My tendency, though, might be to sell into this and then kind of hang back and watch the 620 for a re-entry. Now, you'll notice that the thing is just kind of hanging tight and not really going anywhere. So it's holding the low of the day, which I believe is would be right here, which is 2162. So you could technically buy this using 2162 as your selling guide, and that's workable. But I liked it along the 20-day moving average, and I've talked about it many times with the volume drawing up along the 20-day, and then you get to participate in these fun moves to the upside. So somebody's saying, FYI, mining and metal ores group beginning to break out. Well, let's look at Newmont. That's not really a breakout to me. I'm not sure which one. What's the, hey, Dr. K, what's the, is it AGX? Is the...
GDX is the gold miners.
I'm sorry, what is GDX? That's right. I don't know where I get that from. I don't really see that breaking out, so not really sure. What are you talking about?
On a downtrend,
really. FCX trying to come out. It had like a pocket, but that's even looking kind of weird. So I'm not sure what you're talking about there, Joe. Maybe you could be more specific. Rio. Oh, well, that's, you're seeing the metals have been moving. X also coming up, but Rio is a foreign company. I don't know what's going on with that. But let's take a look at the weekly chart. But again, is this really, oops, what's going on here? Come on. I guess it's trying to break out, but it's not really breaking out. It's coming up to the top of the prior base. So I don't know, but that's just one. So I don't, are there other, what about Cliffs over here? That's trying to come, that's in a similar group. I don't know, I guess it doesn't really thrill me, but I don't think I need to mess with these groups when I can own stocks like NTNX or, even the ones I mentioned in the Voodoo report last week. Cloudera is moving higher. Goose is pushing, trying to get above the 50-day. That would trigger a 50-day undercut and rally. You look at some of these other names. Mule is pushing, trying to push up and out. Yext had the pocket pivot, and it's moving higher. I've talked about the oils, and Frac had a pocket pivot yesterday, which looks better. So, I guess if you're fixated on the metal ores group, you can try and play there. But Rio is kind of in an extended position, so why would you even think about this as something to buy here? You would have been smarter or better off trying to find the buy point within the base. Go ahead, Dr. K.
Yeah, keep in mind also he should be aware that, okay, BHP is in the same group, etc. They're coming strong off their lows. But overall, there's a lot of names in this group that aren't really doing that. So the odds are kind of against you. I mean, the group strength is pretty low still. It's in the bottom 25%. So I mean, this is not low-hanging fruit, especially in a market like this. So I wouldn't mess with stuff like these kinds of names and go for the ones that are showing. Yeah, like Gil mentioned, Yext. That was a pretty obvious one we put into the Voodoo report. It had a string of low volume days. It was a perfect Voodoo setup, and then yesterday it became 2 days ago it became actionable. Right around 13.5.
Right, and then this one too, Light had a pocket pivot here last week. We actually mentioned that over the weekend. You pull into the 20-day line, and you can go long the stock right there, and that works very nicely. So these are much more powerful names, I think, than metal ores. So I don't know, but so if you want to play there, go ahead, but not really. For me, I prefer to go with the things that are hopping and popping, like AAOI. Appian Group is another new issue. So you're seeing a lot of these new issues. This one runs up, pulls back, runs up and pulls back. And now we're making another new high today. And so you just buy it on the pullbacks. And it's relatively liquid for a small IPO. It's a thin float, but that's not really an issue. Someone was asking me, is that a problem? It's like, well, I wouldn't be telling people to buy it if I thought it was a problem. So, yeah, I know Rio's up 8% in 2 weeks, but what does that mean? Are you going to buy it here? Nutanix is up 10% in 1 day. Another one that I talked about was Shift Pixie last week, I put out in a Voodoo report. I said check that name out. I'd like to pull back into 9 here. You see the volume drying up. So I actually think this is a very compelling story here. So you have the volume pull back and the dry up here, and then you go up 10% in one day. So if you get excited about Rio here, up 8% in 6 days, you know, the thing is, are you going to buy it here? So even bringing it up here, what's the point? You're not helping anybody unless you're asking us to somehow bless your trade, in which case you shouldn't be trading. But and hopefully you bought it lower. So if you did, great. But otherwise, it's up here. I'm not going to tell you, oh, you got to buy this. It's a brand new leader. I prefer more compelling thematic situations. You know, so metal ores are great, you know, but there's not as much juice in them as there are in some of the more compelling themes, like the optical space, like light and AAOI, like the cloud space, like APPN. But let's go through some more of these names, like
Also, I
Baba.
was just mentioning real quick, Pixie, it matches, what it does, what's compelling about the story is it matches workers with companies looking to fill those roles without all the bureaucratic paperwork. So it's kind of like, you know, the Uber for companies and workers. It matches them up very well. Uber matches up passengers with drivers very efficiently. So I think Pixie's onto something that could be pretty explosive growth, even though right now it's still, you know, in very, you know, small cap territory. But you know, from what I can see, it's got a great business model. And the question is, you know, how many other, like, well, with Uber, how many other Ubers were there? There's really none except, well, Lyft. I guess that's its competitor. But they both thrive in the space because there's great demand for that matchup. And I think there's great demand for companies and workers that need to be matched up.
Okay, where were we? Baba is just continuing higher. That was Bible along the 10-day line. One of the things I would point out is I haven't felt a need to start adding a bunch of names to the list. We took some off. You could have taken profits on some of them, or you could have just sat and used your own stops. And a lot of them, like Facebook, Amazon, have gone higher. But you know, there are enough names, I think, to make money with these. So Square, for example, there's a breakout, and that you could have bought that if you wanted to on Tuesday, I think that was, and it's gone higher. So there's no real reason to. You know, we took it off the list. We thought you'd take profits, and of course it goes higher. So, but either way, this thing has been a great winner for us because we first put it on down in here, I think closer on this Bible gap up when it was closer to 16 or so, 16, 17, and it's just continued higher. So it's up over, well over 50, 60%. So we just felt we should take some profits. But this market is just kind of weird, and things just come back out of nowhere, which in that case, the moving average undercut and rally setup remains your best weapon. So, you know, I like it personally, and I use it often, early and often. Let's see, let's go to light. We looked at that. Netflix we looked at. So Netflix hanging along the day line. The only problem there is that you have earnings on Tuesday after the close, so not really one. Here's Now. So Now breaks out on no volume. You like that? That happened on Wednesday, so you get a breakout on no volume. Somebody downgrades it. It goes down to the 10-day line. It gets support off the line. Now it may, if it closes up, it'll actually be a pocket pivot off of the 10-day line. But again, your best bet is to try and buy it near the 10-day line rather than chasing the breakout on no volume. And that's acting okay, and that's still on the list. So like I said, I think there are enough names on the list to work as vehicles if you're trying to push onto the long side. And Take Two also has worked okay. Looking a little shaky, but as we wrote in our notes over the weekend, it was able to regain the 20-day moving average. So on this one, that would become an MAUNR setup at the 20-day exponential moving average. And then you get a nice little pullback right here on where it actually, the volume picked up, and I remember seeing that, but I thought, no, this is probably a buy right here because you close above mid-range, so you get support and you hold the line, so that's constructive. And then you push higher from there. Now you're just kind of pulling in and volume's drying up. Right now you're 78% below average, so maybe it's just going to pull in and head higher. But you know, there's nothing really wrong with this now. It looks like it's just setting up. But again, you're going to have earnings coming out at the beginning of August, and of course its brothers, Activision, or rather, I'm sorry, its cousins, Activision back up to the highs, and that occurred on a pocket pivot. So now you're trying to come in a little bit. And the other one is EA, Electronic Arts, which is trying to hold at the 50-day line. So it looks like it might want to hold. So we'll see. But nothing really wrong with this overall other than the fact that you see some heavy selling in the pattern, but it's just holding in a base. It's really all it's doing. And if you look at the weekly volume, for example, you have this week and this week, they don't look so heavy relative to these 2 weeks in the middle, which were up weeks, even though you did stall here. So, you know, it's probably in a base building period right now, and it's just kind of hanging loose. So, and you see a lot of this. So I think, you know, you got to be open to where the entry points are. But the trick, I think, is not getting overwhelmed with too many names. When the market gets this tricky, I think it's much better to focus on a few names, and that's why we've had fewer names on the list, because it just gives you less things to focus on. Not that some of these things didn't come back with a vengeance, which some of them did, you know, like Facebook, like Coherent. Amazon also was another one that we took off. Viva Systems, this one's another one we had taken off before, and now, you know, when it broke down like this, but it's found support and it's setting up again. We like this pocket pivot off of the 50-day line, which is here, I believe. Is that right? What? No, it was actually a 5-day pocket pivot. So
then you have the 10-day.
Yeah, so that was good enough. But again, it regains a 20-day line, and it's just setting up in a base. Earnings will be coming out at the end of August, so you got a lot of time between now and then to start thinking about this as something you might want to buy beforehand or on a pullback. And I don't, you know, we'll see where it goes before earnings. But in the meantime, it's not really acting all that abnormally. So, anyways. Frac, I think I just talked about that. Frac's like another one. I just talked about that. And that has, it just posted a pocket pivot yesterday, just hanging loose. But it's in this sort of low base range. So the other one that I've talked about, JAG, was able to break out. And these names are pretty volatile. And the whole thing is predicated on where oil goes from here. So you're looking at, you know, this breakout here, which is almost a viable gap up, early in the morning, and now it's come back in, and it's kind of flopping around. So, you know, I think the key here is buying it on the pullback to the top of the base on these. So, but that, you know, so far they've worked, but nothing tremendous on the upside. I think some of these tech names are also good. So banks look interesting on earnings. I guess they're pulling back to the 20-day, so you could, you know, they came out, Wells Fargo, Citigroup, and JP Morgan came out with earnings today, and they all gapped down. So they're trying to find, Wells Fargo seems to be the weakest. They're trying to find support along the 20-day exponential. But I don't know. What's your take on the financials, Dr. K?
Well, you know, they don't excite me. There's just, I don't know. They're not really, I don't know. They're not actionable to me because they're, you know, they've never really been. You know, these are big juggernauts. And
yeah, they're all over the place.
Quickly, and their patterns tend to be pretty sloppy, you know. So I try to go for the lower hanging fruit, cleaner patterns.
Yeah, the stronger names. So, you know, those are some of the other ones that we have on the list. We haven't put any of the financials on the list because they're still just kind of choppy. And the whole thing, even if you look at, I mean, Citigroup is probably one of the better ones, mainly because it broke out of a base and it's been going higher, but they're kind of choppy, and the whole thing is predicated on the idea that interest rates are going to continue to rise. And I don't know if that's necessarily a given. So I would be a little wary of that as a driver. The other one is potential for bank reform legislation, eliminating Dodd-Frank, which they claim will unleash like $2 trillion of capital into the markets. But we'll see. So I don't know if they're interesting, but I don't know. Some people fixate on what I think are mostly boring names. You know, these things take a month to go up 10%, and it's kind of like, why do I need that when I can make 10% in a day playing some of these names, you know, or this, or any of these, you know. It's like, why do I need those? I don't need them, so I don't really mess with them. I think if you're looking at banks, you lack some creativity. All Although, you know, there have been times when financials have had big moves. I remember in the 90s, I think it was 97, financials had a big move. And there are a bunch of credit names that were going nuts. So, I don't
That's when
know.
the oils moved. That was the one time the oils, that window opened on the
Yeah.
oils in a big way.
Baozun is a Chinese name we've kept on along with Baba, and that's been the right one to keep on, I think, because it's had just a huge move. And you saw it pull into the 20-day line where it became actionable. And that looked, you know, that looked good right there, viable, and it just continued higher. Now, my tendency would, when it's up 10-50%, would be to sell into the move, but it's really going nuts. So other ones that are taken off the list, Momo's trying to set up again, and it doesn't look half bad. But again, why do I need Momo if I have Baozun? That one works just fine. JD looks like it's trying to set up again, JD.com, and maybe it is, and maybe it's just going to go higher. So that one's not on the list, but we could add it back depending on what happens. But again, the main point is, I think in this market, it's number one, it's very tricky. So what I like to do is operate with a very short list of names, and right now I'm operating with a pretty short list of names, 10 probably that I'm looking at. Things like Appian, and then I'm also looking at new merchandise type stuff. So this is basically my tight watch list: Light, Appian, Light, AAOI, Applied Opto. I'm sorry, Goose is on there, NTNX, Cloudera, Pixie, which looks great to me. I mean, this thing could be like another Airgain. I remember when Airgain came public, and it just kept doing this. It came public, it just kept going higher like this. So I'm hoping maybe Pixie does something like that, and maybe just starting its own little steady truck to the upside, but we'll see. I mean, I think it's a very compelling concept. So even at the very least, let's say we went into a market correction or something, or a pullback, at the very least, I think it would set up in a base, and you'd look to buy it back again at some point. So, or buy it at some point. So Yext is another one that's on my watch list, and I think this is a compelling story. And you know, it's an IPO base, so it takes some time to set up. And you allow all this, you know, stuff to go on. Everybody gets bearish. It's trying to come out of here. The place to buy it was on Wednesday when it's hanging around here, close to the 10-day and the 50-day moving average. Actually, that's the confluence of the 10-day and the 20-day exponential moving averages. So, you know, that's up there. So I'd watch for pullbacks into the 50-day line from here as potential lower risk entry points. So today's Cyber actually got blasted. Someone's asking about Palo Alto Networks, but CyberArk got blasted after earnings, and this sent the whole group down. And I think maybe it could set up a buying opportunity in something like Palo Alto Networks. I know that it certainly did in Fortinet, which broke down to the 20-day line, but it's turning back the other way. And you could have watched this come off the 20-day line and then regain the 50-day line, at which point it becomes a and it did it relatively quickly, because it gapped down at the opening, and then it just turned right around. Then you got a 620 buy signal right around 39.60, which is up here. But I think I would have just focused on the moving averages. And this is the sort of thing you have to look for, are opportunities that just sort of materialize, sometimes seemingly out of nowhere, and you just jump on them.
Well, yeah, that's a good example of a moving average undercut and rally there.
Yeah, so Zillow Group was, now look at this. This will drive you batty. This thing we put on here because it looked like it was having a pocket pivot off the 50-day line. Is actually hit the 10-week moving average on the weekly chart and bounced, and so it looked good. And then the next day they just hammered it. And now you just sort of drift back up to the 20-day line, and volumes looks like it's going to decline today, but we'll see how it ends up closing. And it just, you know, bops right back up. So you probably would have been, this move on, that would have been what, Tuesday? Or no, I'm sorry, Wednesday. Yeah, that would have been, you know, that was ugly, and that's something you'd think, oh my God, I got to bail on this one. And we just took it off on that basis, and the turkey just bounces back to the upside. So I don't know, it may take some time to set up. It has looked pretty good. I think it was on news that Amazon is, or somebody else is moving into their space in terms of listings for housing and apartment rentals, or which I believe is what they do, both of those. Let's see, any others? I think that's it for the focus list. So again, my approach here is just to focus on a few names, and so luckily they've been working pretty well. Mule's another one that I watch because it's a new issue and it looks like it's trying to turn here, so that's one, and I'll play those. But it's like you don't need. And then there's this one, and I talked about this one a couple of weeks ago when it was hanging tight along the 20-day line, and that's broken out. Alteryx. They're supplying something to Microsoft, and so that's that's a big deal, and that caused the stock to break out on pretty heavy volume. You can see it here. But again, these new merchandise names seem to be gathering some momentum, which I think is positive for the market, and I guess we'll find out. Now on the short side, there's really not much. Like yesterday, someone that was asking me, what do you see on the short side? Well, the only thing I really see, and I do have a position in it short right now, not a big one, got back in at the 10-day line yesterday, and it's just kind of hanging out. Not a lot of volume trading is Tesla. So this might be, the thing is, unless the market breaks down, this may not get a lot of juice, but you never know because it blew wide open, and it's tried to recover with the market, and so far, what it looks to me is just kind of head and shoulders-y to me. Whoops, get over there. A little trouble with this. Let's try that again. Way over here. My mouse is sticking on the mouse pad. I don't know why. So this could be the right shoulder and a head and shoulders formation. That's what we're looking at. So I think, near term becomes shortable at the 10-day line. If it goes above it, and here I'm actually assured, if it gets above 328.51 here, which is a 10-day line, I just cover it, and I'm assured that I'm not going to get into any trouble because I shorted it yesterday at the 10-day line, which was closer to like 332 at the time. So I can work that one, and we'll see where the turkey goes from here. But I think the short side, I think it's helpful to have some shorts in mind, but there aren't really very many outside of Tesla, and so you're just ready to move on those. Look at the market. The Dow's up 47, so it was looking kind of weak a little while ago. Now it's starting to pick up some momentum. First Solar is one that flipped to the long side last week because of the fact that I could feel trying to short it here. That seemed to be it, and then even trying to short at the 10-day, you didn't really feel any resistance in the stock, and no real selling coming into play here. So it turns into a long, and you get a pocket pivot off of the 10-day line here, and it's continuing higher. So my theory on these, and again, when I come up with a theory about a stock, it's not written in stone. Ultimately, the price volume action rules everything. I know a lot of people want to stake their egos on some grand theories, but I just watch what the thing is doing, and if I'm trying to short something based on a premise, and in this case I was thinking that they all rallied out of nowhere back here, all the solars did. They all rallied out of nowhere here when Trump babbled something about putting solar panels on the wall that he's going to build. It's like, okay, and then now they're talking about they need to make a see-through wall. So I'm not sure how that meshes with solar panels. So I'm thinking, okay, this is going to give it up. Now, if you look at SunPower, that one gave it up, but now it's turned around and gone higher. And you've seen a lot of solar names all continue higher with First Solar, and SunPower is moving higher, and SolarEdge also is moving higher. They were added to the S&P Small Cap 600, I think, and that's what caused the gap up, but it's continuing higher. You can look at Canadian Solar. So the whole group is moving. And I think maybe this is related, if anybody else knows, let me know, but maybe it's related to the fact that oil is trying to find a bottom, but it's at the 50-day line. And we'll see whether it can actually convincingly regain the 50-day line. That's what I'd be watching for as a confirmation for names like Frac and Jag. So some other questions. Someone's asking about Sienna. My position is the optical space, I think, is very compelling. But I don't see why you need to play other stocks besides Lite, L-I-T-E, and AAOI. I don't see why you need to focus outside the group. You start diluting yourself, and you're going to get into this one, and Finisar, which maybe looks okay, and you're going to get into Fabrinet, looks okay, and it's kind of interesting. But the bottom line is the real leaders, I think, are Lite and AAOI. So why not just play there and focus on those? So you have those on your watch list, and you can focus on them during the day, and you can find yourself to maybe 10, 15 names max, and just stay in that little group, because it helps you operate, I think, a lot better. And I'm very flexible. I'll be in and out of something. I might test it on the long side. If it doesn't work, I'll bail out, and then I'll look to come back in on a pullback. You know, the AOI is a good example here. And you can't have a rigid view, because this gave you an entry point here, and then it closed up, and it kept going higher. My inclination, somebody came out with a $100 price target. I think it's probably going to pull in somewhere along here. I thought it would do it last week, and it did. If you go back and look at the webinar, but it was a small pullback into the 20-day line, but that worked pretty well, and you could have bought it there. And I prefer to buy them on the pullbacks once they get extended and sell into the extreme strength. So, so I guess we'll see how things pan out here with these. But so far, so good. They're acting pretty well. They give you entry points on pullbacks, and I don't see why you need to play with every single optical name, especially the laggards. Sienna is kind of big and slow. Finisar is an old name, and it's kind of big and slow, but it could go higher. I'm sure if you see these others like Light and AAOI go higher, they're all going to go higher. But again, I'm trying to focus on what I think are the very best names in the group, and these happen to be the ones that I'm focused on. So look at the Dow's up 57. I can't believe this thing. It doesn't want to stop. And we're making an all-time high in the Dow. Let's see, what's the S&P doing right now? The S&P is making an all-time high. The Nasdaq is just lagging behind. So amazing. But that's the way this market rolls. So good, Scotty. If you own AAOI, then you're good. You don't need Sienna. So why dilute yourself with something like and I'm saying dilute with a T, dilute, not dilute. That's another issue altogether. Why dilute your holdings with something like a Sienna, which maybe is an iffy name. The tendency also is, I'm going to buy this one because it's pulling back, but the one that's moving and that's hot is AAOI. Now the Dow's up 71. Maybe we're just going to go parabolic here. Sure acts like it wants to. I don't know. Let's see. My UVXY, which I'm holding, by the way, it's my hedge. Go on my Twitter page. I liken it to Al Pacino in the movie Scarface when he has that grenade launcher. He's like, you wanna play dirty? Let me introduce you to my little friend, and then he just blasts the door open and wipes all these guys out. So, anyways, let's see. Yek's looking okay here. What else looks good? Kind of like the way Goose is acting. I don't know. Maybe they're trying to suck everybody in here, and then they're going to roll it back suddenly. So, according to HCSI, AOI, and Light are not in Sienna's industry group. Well, I don't think they're correct on that. I mean, one of the things with HCSI is I don't agree with a lot of their industry group listings. So Sienna is a fiber optics company. They're similar to Finisar. They're similar to Juniper. And so I would lump them all as fiber optic names. And so Light is also a fiber optic name, and so is AOI in the optical space. So I'd lump them all together. But again, why do I need that? Why do I need this if I have this, or I'm playing this, or whatever? I don't. So that's that. Anyways, but, if you want me to evaluate this on a technical basis, well, it's pulling into the 10-day line and the 20-day line. I guess if it holds, that's constructive. So, anyways. Anything else? I think we're pretty much done here, but I think you guys get the idea, and there's some actionable names, or there have been, if you're reading the Voodoo report, and also some of the names that we've had on the list based on undercut and rally type moves. So, I think... it's everything's, there are stocks that have come into buyable positions, and again, I think the undercut and rally and the moving average undercut and rally are your best bets for entries when you get this kind of a market. I'm not so sure I'd be buying base breakouts. I'm a little leery of that. AAOI is working. Coherent so far is working, but they're straight up off the bottom, so you can't chase these. I like buying them lower in the pattern. So I think if you're trying to be a little more judicious, then that's what you're doing. So, that's what I would focus on. Anyways, that's all I've got. I think we've covered some reasonable ideas. The only thing I'm looking at on the short side is Tesla, but of course the market's making new highs, so the short side is not necessarily going to be the place where you're going to make a ton of money until we actually get into a bear market. However, that does not preclude something like Tesla from going lower if the fundamental story starts to break down, which I think it is. And I think the whole thing is smoke and mirrors in terms of an actual business. Elon Musk is probably the greatest bullshitter on the planet. Maybe he'll run for president someday, but he does just spew stuff all the time and shades things to make him sound positive, like, that he makes a big deal out of the Model 3 passing the regulatory hurdles early, but then they release their sales numbers and they're pretty feeble. So, I don't really see anything there. Anyways, so that's all I've got. So everybody, thanks for showing up. I think if we can't get this recording on, I may just do a stock hunting webinar over the weekend, so, and just go from there. So we'll see what happens. Anyways, thanks for showing up, you guys. Have a great weekend. We'll catch you next week.
So long, everyone.